Hey guys, autofanatic here. We have a new car review of a 2018 Mercedes-Benz S560 Fanatic. This is a really interesting car, and I'm glad I had the opportunity to do a review of this car today for you guys. And I'm going to discuss a little bit about my experience with the S-Class since the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, and explain a little bit about the progression of this car in the last 30 years, because the advancements in technology, features, and everything else, including the rate of inflation, has pretty much doubled the price of this car since like the mid-1980s. But what's really cool about the new one, it's got a new designation as the 560, which is a classic throwback to the W126 chassis 560 SEL. And I think that's really cool that they did that. Even though they went down on the displacement of the engine, the new model on the 560 is a 4.0 liter bi-turbo V8, 463 horsepower, 516 foot-pounds of torque. A really massive increase in power in the last 30 years for a non-AMG variant. I'm just going to give you a little bit of my opinion on the exterior car, the styling, the interior, and I'll discuss more about this car on the drive portion of this video. Alright guys, I got the camera focusing on the side profile of the car, and as you guys could tell, it's a massively big car, but the new design language of Mercedes and their design team, they do an outstanding job of taking such a large vehicle and sculpting it so it doesn't really appear that large. And to be honest with you, if you look at the C-Class, this is a grown-up version, a bigger version of that. So they were able to take all the proportions of the car between the belt line, the roof line, and everything in between, and they perfectly shaped it. And I discuss a little bit more in the drive portion of the video of how well the aerodynamics are of this vehicle. They are incredible. Compared to the S-Classes from the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, they are so aerodynamically efficient, and I think they need to be for government regulations, whether it's crash testing, EPA fuel economy, and everything in between, because the cars are packed with so much more technology. They're also increasing weight, and to reduce the coefficient of drag, they really have to spend time in the wind tunnel. And I'll tell you right now, this car is incredible aerodynamically, and I'll explain a little bit more of the features along the way. I'm going to move a couple of details around the car and just go over, what I feel are important design elements. Alright guys, we're back. This particular vehicle has a new wheel design. It's a multi-spoke, has a little bit of a fan pattern, and I actually like it. I think in the 19-inch, it really complements the vehicle. Now, if you go back in the days where they were putting 15 and 16-inch wheels on S-Class Mercedes cars of this size, they really looked undersized, and that's why, rims and tire upgrades were so popular back then. Now, this car has 19-inch wheels. It's like a standard fitment, and it's a staggered fitment all the way around. We have a 275/40/19 in the rear, 245/45 in the front. And one thing we did on this car, we replaced the OEM Continental Pro Contact run flat tires. The reason we did that, in the New York City area, if you drive this car with the potholes we have, you are going to bend and crack your wheels on a regular basis. So this time around, the customer listened to us. We put a mobility kit in the trunk for them. We got the Michelin Pilot AS3 Pluses. I love this tire. It's a great all-around tire. The customer already commented it's better in the snow than the Continentals. It rides better, handles better, better steering response. I know it's an expense that you probably don't want to deal with, but like I said, if you own one of these cars and you deal with rim and tire failures on a constant basis, the only solution that's going to make your life easier is getting rid of those run flats. But the one thing I like about this wheel, and the way I feel it complements this car, is that it has a very German DTM motorsport styling to it. And if any of you guys know about DTM and motorsports and all those cars, they use a multi-spoke pattern like this. So I really think it's really elegant, and it adds to the design and the classiness of this car. It's just one of those things that, wheels can make or break a car. And I think in this car, like for a base wheel, it's nice. They do have sportier wheels in the option package in 20, 21-inch, but living around here in New York City, you're going to run into a big issue when you hit potholes. You're going to be on the side of the road constantly. So one thing I wanted to talk about, I'm going to move the camera over to the back tail light. I just want to show you guys something that's really amazing. All right, guys, we're back in the rear taillight section of the car, and I just wanted to explain something as far as a design element that I think is so amazing. The way these taillights are mounted, they are flush mounted into the body of the car. There is no gap. There is a practically zero tolerance of the taillights all the way around. And the fact that they were able to do that in the design of the car and offer it for repeatability for servicing the lamp, whether it's auto body or replacements. You know, these are definitely keyed to lock into a position, but it's so streamlined and so sculpted. And it's just a huge departure from the taillight designs of prior generation S-Classes. I really think it is. And it has a nice touch. You know, you have the Mercedes-Benz embossment in the filament inside the taillight housing. So guys, we're over at the front of the car, and for 2018, the entire lower fascia has been redesigned, and they just added a little bit more chrome going along the way. And you know, it's just an elegant look. It's got the signature design of the Mercedes-Benz grille. It's got the star. It's always going to have the Mercedes-Benz crest and badge on the grille. They've been doing that forever. And like I said, this car has the radar Distronic option, you know, for the cruise control, and it also has a whole bunch of driving aids. And the same thing in the front of this car. They sculpted, you know, the lights perfectly into the bumper. I mean, there is like zero tolerance, and these are multi-beam LED projector lamps. And like I said, you know, from a design element of this car, it's very contemporary, it's very modern. It doesn't look like a chiseled out old car like the 126 and the 140 chassis are. You know, this car is very aerodynamically efficient, and the design house of Mercedes-Benz, they've given it a sculpted, sensual, athletic styling to such a very large machinery, to such a very large car here. And you know, that's not an easy task to do, is to throw in a couple of sporty, you know, design elements, integrate everything flush mounted so you have a really clean and flowing design language. And they didn't go crazy with bulges in the hood and, you know, doing stuff that other auto manufacturers are doing. And I really think other car companies, they're overdoing, and they're trying too hard to find their identity. And I think Mercedes-Benz at this day and age, they know their identity inside and out. I mean, it's just a very clean hood. It's got a subtle crease down the middle of it, two subtle design lines on the side, and of course it's all for aerodynamics, and it just looks good, you know, all the way into the door mirrors. I mean, we'll walk over there. There are little indentations for aerodynamics and drag reduction right on the back. I mean, that's a really clever touch. I mean, here again, the lenses are perfectly integrated. You know, it's got the piano black plastic trim that complements this. This has projector beam lamps down here. I mean, this car is full with bells and whistles. So guys, here's the power plant of the S560 Fanatic. It's a 4-liter bi-turbo V8. It looks massive because of the engine cover, but the displacement is actually really small. 463 horsepower, 516 foot-pounds of torque. It is super refined, super smooth. I mean, it's running right now, you can't even hear it. And it's got plenty of power, and it's paired to a 9-speed G-tronic transmission with really good shift logic. I mean, the thing shifts absolutely amazing. And it's nice and clean under here, not like the S-Classes from the 80s where they were loaded with Cosmoline all over everything and it looked kind of crappy. You know, it just looks much more tailored and streamlined. So guys, like I said, this is the pinnacle of the brand. This is the identity of Mercedes-Benz. And you know, throughout the early 2000s, they really did lose the benchmark. You know, as far as quality control, they alienated a lot of their old school buyers, and people went over to other brands, such as Lexus. And you know, if you go back in history and you do your automotive research, that was the case. I mean, there was always going to be people that are going to buy this car, whether it was a good car or not a good car. But when Mercedes-Benz ventured into the new chassis, which was introduced in 2015, they really set up all the stops. They basically said, we need to build the best car within this price segment, we need to kick the crap out of all of our competition, and we need to do it, and that's it. There's no questions asked. So they had a goal. They wanted to be at the Paramount. They wanted to be #1, and with this car, they actually did do it. And for 2018, you know, it's just a little bit of a facelift. We have better motors, you know, a little bit more options on the interior, different wheel choices and stuff like that, and some subtle, you know, design touches. But, you know, this is a very important car to Mercedes-Benz. If this car wasn't good, if this car really wasn't their brand DNA, it would really alienate a lot of the people that gravitate towards the brand, you know, because people are going to Mercedes-Benz because they want the status, they want the luxury, they want the identity of driving a world-class automobile. And, you know, Mercedes-Benz Design House, I mean, they could take an antiquated G-Wagon that's been around since the 70s and refresh it and still make it look cool in 2018. I mean, that just shows you, you know, how good their design team is as far as how they're sculpting and shaping and then taking into consideration all the aerodynamics and coefficient of drag and everything else. And it's unbelievable because, like, in the 80s and 90s, these cars were very boxy. They were very masculine, very macho. Now, they're very contemporary. They have a very feminine flow, a very curvaceous shape. They pinched, you know, the rear of the car. They squeezed the front of the car in the design. And like I said, if you guys are in tune with, you know, fine art, architecture, you know, interior design or anything, you know, even with fashion, you know, these are all modern applications and inputs of the current modern design language. I mean, you know, being so close to New York City, I see this stuff in everything, whether it's at a museum, at a building, at a showroom, at a gallery. You know, this is stuff that I pick up on, you know, being that I have a background in my other business is architectural, you know, very high-end architectural design. So I appreciate the efforts that went into doing this car. I really do. I think, you know, they took a very massive car, and with the right execution of design and application, they made the car shrink around you. It actually has a very sporty, sensual, curvaceous silhouette. It doesn't look like a big box. And they've cleverly achieved their goal, because I don't think in this day and age people are going to want to drive a big box, especially if you go back in the days. You know, how many 140 chassis and 126 chassis do you see on the road today? You know, you see very little to none. You're lucky if you see those cars on the road. And, you know, also those older models, they never catered to the female buyer. Okay, the female buyer 30 years back and prior always bought and always drove an SL Mercedes, okay, because that was the only one that didn't look like a box and everything else. And you know, this car was always the gentleman's stately, executive, chauffeur-driven, entrepreneur, entertainment mogul. You know, it was that type of a car. Always was, and it still always will be. And I think, you know, at this day in the age, I don't think the other car manufacturers are coming close to this. You know, they're building really good cars, you know, Audi, BMW, like the Porsche Panamera, but they don't have the status and the stately history that this car has, okay? And that's just the reality of it. That's just automotive history at its best. You know, people think, what is the most exclusive luxury full-size sedan in the world? Mercedes-Benz S-Class, you know, as far as production cars. And then you go into those bespoke limited production brands like Rolls-Royce, Bentley, and, you know, but those are not even in the same category. They're 2, 3 to 4 times the price when you start loading those cars up with options. But, you know, this car we have here is in the Designo metallic white. It's got the light cashmere interior, and we're going to move the camera over to the inside. I'm going to show you some of the details, and then we're going to go on the drive video. All right, guys, we're over at the interior of the car now. I just want to give you some close-ups of some really, really cool design details. I mean, look at the door lock pin, how it's got the really cooled, knurled finish. Yeah, it's not aluminum or stainless. It is plastic, and it has aluminum type of coating, but it's just a cool design touch, you know, to do that. And all of the buttons, you know, for the windows and for the doors have an aluminum touch to them, even down here into the lower pocket. The Burmester stereo, you know, all the speaker grills are all satin stainless steel. You have nice walnut burl gloss wood. You know, that's just what customers of this car want. You know, here's more of the Burmester stereo. This has a 24 speaker stereo throughout. It is absolutely incredible. And look at something like this, something you guys may not even, you know, take into consideration, but the steering wheel in this car is so sculpted and so shaped in such a really, really elegant manner. I mean, when was the last time you got into a car and you actually said the steering wheel looks sexy? You know, it looks tailored, it looks sculpted. Not very much these days. I mean, this is a really nice steering wheel. You have finger touch buttons on both sides of the steering wheel to pretty much control all of the technology in this car. The one disappointment, they have plastic paddle shifters. I think they, at this price point, they should have put a metal paddle shifter or just eliminated a paddle shifter all along, because I don't think older guys that are driving this car are going to be paddle shifting it. That's just my opinion with the 9-speed automatic. The 9-speed G-tronic is a hell of a good transmission in this car. It's much better than the old school 4-speeds, the 5-speeds, and the 7 G-tronics that were used for so many years. These are the multi-way power seats. They do everything. They massage you, they vibrate, they do all kinds of crazy things that, you know, go back here, you know, you can still see it has Burmester speakers in the roof. I mean, the stereo in this car is insane. So I'm going to set the camera up in the back. All right, guys, we're over in the interior of the car. Just want to give you a quick little brief overview of what's going on in here. The level of technology is through the roof. There's a huge learning curve. I actually feel bad for the older guys that are buying this car. They're going to probably go crazy trying to figure out how to use it. They're going to think it's broken all the time. I really think Mercedes-Benz should give all owners of this car a 1 to 2 day school or training session, because there's just so much going on. Now, as far as the design language of the car, it is totally unconventional from classic S-Class DNA. There is no more real center console with a shift knob. Now you have a shift stalk on the steering column, which is fine. You get used to it. Like I said, the steering wheel, I think, as a designer, is a work of art. The air vents are really, really cool. If any of you guys know about cars, Bentley, back in the 90s, with like the Arnage models, they used similar styled AC vents, okay, except those were made out of like polished stainless steel. In this car, they're made out of plastic with aluminum coating. So you have to understand, this is not a $300,000 car, okay? This car starts at about $100 grand, and nicely optioned for the S560 Fanatic is about like $125 to $130, depending on the options you get. This particular car, you know, you have the optional leather interior. You got the 24 speaker Burmester stereo, which I'm going to do a separate review one of these days because the stereo is outstanding. I'll also be doing a review of some of the technology and some of the features of this car. It's just so intensive that it would take me forever to put that together in one video. But, you know, everything is stitched in leather. Everything is soft touch material. You got the gloss burl wood, you know, finish on the wood. You know, it's got the satin aluminum trim, you know, going all the way across the lower fascia and the belt line of the dash. And it's really interesting because they're going with the satin finish throughout the whole car. But on the exterior of the car, they're giving you a little bit of chrome on the door handles, on the bumper, and stuff like that. And then the rest of the trim around the around the side glass is the same satin type of finish. Not really sure if they're going to transition away from the chrome, but it just might be one of those things where their audience and the people that buy this car, that's what they want. You know, and the satin finish is a huge departure from like the old school utilitarian dashboards that we had in the 80s and 90s, where you had AC knobs that were just little wheels with a blue and red color that you would wheel it up and down. There was no real control center. It was just a knob and a little wheel that went up and down. And that's just the way it was done back in the days. And of course you have your center console, you know, you have your wheel, and there's a couple of features. I'm going to move the camera over in the front, and I'm going to show you a couple of things that I really like about this car. It kind of has like the iDrive style wheel, and they've been doing this for a while. You also get a touchpad here. You have your controls for your media, your radio, your nav. This is your chassis settings, you know, dynamic, sport, comfort. This is the automatic engine shut-off feature right here. You can turn that on and off on the fly. Here's your airmatic to raise and lower the vehicle. This is your parking camera, which shows up on the LCD screen on the dash. And this is a volume knob, a rotary volume knob. And I really, really like this knob. Granted, this is most likely designated for the passenger. But to be honest with you, when I drive this car and my arm is on the armrest, I could easily use my thumb, because you're driving this car, you're cruising. Okay, I can use my thumb to raise and lower the volume of the audio relatively easily, and I actually enjoy this than using to control another rotary knob with the knurled finish on the steering wheel. I don't know, I just like when my arm is on the center console, it just feels right to me. I don't know, maybe some of you guys that have this car are using it the same way, but I don't know, for me, this just works. You know, I hold the steering wheel with one hand, and you know, I pretty much play with this. And you guys could see, you know, the interior, all the stitching. Okay. And it's just a really nice place to be. I mean, that's really the only way you could put this car. The seats are absolutely incredible. Heated, ventilated, massaging. I'm telling you, these seats are some of the best in the business that I've been in as far as comfort goes. And they give you, you know, the stock, you know, which actually, you know, back when this came out, BMW with the 7 Series back in 2002 was the first car to really come out with this as far as German cars, and I hated it on that car, but it seems to work a lot better now. And like I said, these are all touch buttons, you know, to control your entire media entertainment system and all the technology this car has, and there's a hell of a lot of technology in this car. So give it a little bit of a wrap around. It's got rear power sunshades on the side windows, the quarter windows, the rear window. It's got a dual panoramic sunroof, as you guys could see. And we're going to strap the camera in the car now. And we're going to go on a thorough road test, and we're going to tell you what, you know, I'm going to tell you guys what I feel of the car and how good it is. I've been driving the car for the whole day, so I have really, really good feedback so far. All right, guys, this is the start of the drive review of the 2018 S560 Fanatic. So far, the one thing that I noticed, just from driving this car for a couple of minutes, and it's totally different than any of the S-Classes that I've driven in the last 30 years, is that there's a pretty significant blind spot from the driver's side B-pillar. That's basically from where I'm sitting in the car. I just really wasn't expecting that for the sheer size of this car. So I had the climate control turned off, have the audio turned off. I really want to judge this car based on 30 years of me working on S-Classes from, you know, the 80s all the way into the 90s and 2000s. And the one thing I do notice, this car does still continue to have the double-paned windows that was introduced on the 140 chassis back in around 1992 with the S-Class. However, they're doing it a little bit differently. The panes of glass are much thinner. They're not using the really thick glass that they were doing back in the 90s. I guess technology has progressed and they changed the process along the way. I remember back in the days, we used to take customers' cars out, and we used to meet girls in the city, and we used to tell everybody that it was an armored bulletproof Mercedes because it had the double pane windows. It was the only production car that I know of in the world that had double pane glass that was done like that. So it was really fun back in the 90s that we used to mess around with people all the time. It's a massive car. The sheer size of this car and the weight, you feel it immediately. This is not a car that has any sporting dynamics whatsoever. But that's what it's expected. I mean, like I said, this is a specific type of car. This is the Mercedes-Benz benchmark. This is still the benchmark in the luxury ultra sedan segment. Now, to be honest with you, after you hit this level of car, there's really not much more you could go. Now, they do make a Maybach, which is essentially the same car, just with more bells and whistles and more personalization, which is fine. That caters to more of an affluent, personalized type of buyer. then as soon as you're at that point, there's only two options to go. You have a Bentley, Mulsanne, and you have a Rolls-Royce. There's nothing else in the market that would be in this segment of a car that's that much better. And to be honest with you, then it becomes a matter of brand preference of what you prefer versus the other. And, you know, and of course, those are much more luxurious, bespoke brands. And those companies, you know, they're all hand-built, you know, those higher-end models, and they will personalize the car any which way you want. Whereas, like on an S-Class like this, you could get a Designo package, you could do maybe very little personalization, but you still have to take into consideration that you're getting a level of luxury and quality and everything else in a mass-produced car below $200,000. And that's really where this car shines. Now, the highway that I'm on now, back in the days, I used to like max out the S-Class Mercedes-Benzes. Like, it was hysterical because back in the 80s, like the SEL 420s and the 560 SELs, you know, you hit the gas, it was like there was like a delay in the throttle response, and then it eventually got up to speed. I remember on this highway, you know, we used to hit 100 or 120, and we thought we were like, oh wow, look how fast we went. But this car that I'm in now has a bi-turbo V8 that has almost 500 horsepower, and it has over 500 foot-pounds of torque. So in the 30 years of progression in technology in the automotive industry, especially with this car, things have increased as far as significantly. Now, the displacement of the motor has gone down from prior generation S-Classes, and they're smart in doing that because it makes it more fuel efficient, it makes it better for packaging, and it also makes takes the weight off the front axle. I'm going to do a quick blast here and see how quickly it'll get up to speed. Now, this car is so subdued as far as road isolation, road noise. I mean, that's why I left everything off. I really want to feel and see how good everything is in this car. Now, something I'll mention, again, we changed the tires on this car. This car originally came with the Continental Pro Contact run flats. And if you live in New York or anywhere where there's potholes, you will damage your wheels on a regular basis if you don't get those tires off. So the owner of this car listened to me finally, and we got the Michelin Pilot AS3 Pluses on here. Now look, I'm at 80 miles an hour, and I feel like I'm still sitting in my living room. Now, the faster I'm going, the tighter the steering is getting. I mean, this car is, these cars, that's one thing that I love about these cars. I mean, I'm into performance, and I love sports cars, but when you get into an S-Class and you get it on a nice stretch of road, and you sit back, and you just feel the way the car just darts. It becomes like this missile, straight ahead. It only has one purpose. It's to go straight ahead fast. Total Autobahn missile. That's what I call these cars. I mean, it's not a Canyon Carver. It's not a car you're going to get in and get like that enthusiastic feel every time you get out. But the car has so much luxury and so much technology. The technology itself, I have to do a video on that separately. There's so much going on in this car. It's actually pretty complicated to use. And I'll still say it. I really think that Mercedes-Benz should offer any owner that owns this car some sort of a training class, because there's so much going on. There's so much to interface with it. And this is catering to a much older audience. You're not going to see young guys in their 20s and 30s really buying this car. That's just not the audience that they're catering to. So guys, you know, between the ages of 60 years old up until 85 years old, they're not all of them are technological savvy. So they're going to have a hard time with this car. And like I said, right now, this has that driver assistance package where it vibrates the steering wheel and the seat belt pulls you if you switch, you know, get into the lane wrong. So it's one of those things where you have to turn it off. It also has the automatic shut off. But I just got in the car. I didn't touch anything. I don't want to touch anything because I haven't spent any time familiarizing myself with this car. But I mean, it's so quiet, and you guys will hear this in the audio. There are no squeaks, there are no rattles, whatever. Now I'm punching it, and it gets up to 80, 90 real quickly. Really quick. And I gotta say, the S-Class Mercedes-Benz prior, you know, in the 1980s, 1990s, early, you know, they didn't have an airmatic type suspension. Those were conventional suspensions, and some of the models in the 90s, they had a self-leveling. Mostly the S600s had that. So this car has a full airmatic suspension, and I'm not a huge fan of air suspensions, but Mercedes does it right on this car. I mean, we have horrible roads in New York, and this thing just soaks it up, and the chassis does not get unsettled whatsoever. I mean, the sheer power and smoothness, it's incredible. Absolutely incredible. There are no vibrations, no driveline vibrations. Now, in the 220 series car, and later on in the mid to late 2000s, when they started putting all-wheel drive into these cars, they used to have a really bad driveline vibration. And I think that had something to do with the packaging and whatever system that they were using. And to be honest with you, they were doing it to become more competitive in the marketplace, because Audi really dominates with the Quattro, then BMW picked on with the X-Drive, and now Mercedes has the 4MATIC. And it's just really a smart option. And I think in this day and age, 2018, I really feel that they really got it right now. I don't feel any harmonics coming through the floor of the car or from the back of the car at high speeds. I mean, this car just cruises, absolutely cruises. This is the type of car that you really would enjoy going on a long distance trip. Like, if I was to drive from New York to LA, I would want to drive this. I would never want to drive a sports car because of the technology, the comfort, and just the sheer luxury that you get with this car. And it's really nice to hold a steering wheel with gloss wood grain. It's been a while since I've gotten into a car with that, because they don't put those in performance cars. And there's a lot of wind today. The winds are about 30 miles an hour, and that's a good indicator of how well the car is designed aerodynamically in the wind tunnel. And I'll discuss more of that on the exterior part of the video. But 80 miles an hour in this car, that's like the average 50 miles an hour in the average car. I mean, it just goes. And it's soaking up those bumps like nothing. You know, 90 miles an hour, effortless. And I'm hitting the brakes, and yeah, she slows down. That was always an attribute of the S-Classes in the 90s. The 140 chassis was like a vault tank when you got into it. And when you get that car up to 140 and hit the brakes, it used to throw you out of the seat, almost into the windshield. And this car has that same attribute. But it's amazing how different this car feels. It feels sure-footed, it feels light on its feet, but as soon as the turns start getting a little bit more aggressive, then you start feeling the sheer size and the weight of the car, which you have to understand and respect it. This is a very large car. It's not a performance car, high performance car anyway. I tell you, but so far, I am very, very impressed. And the last S-Class that I drove was the very first generation of this version, which was back in 2015. And I remember, like I said, I drove that car the first time I drove it, right off the lot. A lot of interior rattles. There was fault codes that came up when they switched over to this new LCD control panel. And I just think, it's like with any car manufacturer, they have growing pains. But I'm really enjoying this now, I gotta tell you. And it's one of those things, like when you get into this car and you put your head against the backrest, it's really like putting it on like a luxurious pillow that you would have in a Chase lounge or on a high-end Italian sofa in your home. And that's really the feeling that you get in this car. You get that level of luxury, and I mean, there's no wind noise at all. I mean, the only quieter car that I've ever been in was the Tesla, because of course it's electric. But I gotta tell you, Mercedes-Benz really did their homework on building and designing this car, because aerodynamically I think it's extremely efficient and extremely well designed, because I'm not hearing any wind, and there's a lot of crosswinds right now on this highway. And another thing too is on a lot of cars where they have aerodynamic issues in their essential design, you'll feel, when there's a crosswind, you'll feel the car, the front of the car all over the road. And I don't feel any of that. This car is rock stable, straight as an arrow. I don't have to fight the steering wheel. There's no tram lining in this car. And the car does have 19-inch wheels and tires. They're staggered. There's 245 45s in the front and a 275 45 in the rear. Not really sure why they did a stagger on an all-wheel drive car, but that's just the way they did it. I guess they did it so you go back and buy more tires. All right, this thing just freaked me out with this safety thing right here. It actually slammed on the brakes without even me touching the brake. So ignore that part of my comments on this, because that's a driving aid that has to be turned off through the menu, and I am not going to sit here for 40 minutes figuring that out, because I have to bring the car back to the owner. And like I said, this is just the first initial evaluation. I'm going to be doing more videos on this vehicle, and also the coupe version, because another one of my clients has one. And I'm going to do a specific video just on the Burmester stereo. This car that I'm in now has the upgraded stereo, which has 24 speakers, and it's listed as 1,500 watts plus a 400 watt subwoofer. Okay, so you're about 2,000 watts. And the only description that I could put this regarding the audio system in this car is, it's like getting punched in the face with SPL. Okay, now, if anybody out there in the New York area who grew up and hung out in New York City in the best nightclubs in New York in the early to mid to late 90s, and you went into clubs like the Limelight, the Palladium, the Tunnel, Sound Factory, whatever, when you walked into those nightclubs, ranked as some of the best sound systems out of any clubs in the world. I mean, people used to come from Europe to figure out how those systems were done in those clubs. So when you walked into those clubs, you would feel the music and the bass and the sound pressure level would just hit your body. And it would almost slow your body down in a very strange way, almost as if you were on like a drug. And that's really the way I would put it. And it's a really interesting feeling, because to do that same effect in a car requires extensive surgery and a lot of money. And we used to do it back in the days. That's what we used to do. We used to work on S-Classes, Benzes, for entertainers, for hip-hop stars, you know, for R&B singers, you name it. We used to put $30,000 stereos in these cars with 15 speakers. You know, I'm being realistic going back then. We used to build out the front doors. We used to put 6 speakers in the doors and the back, and it was just real craziness. But this car's stereo is so damn good, and the louder you play it, they fine-tuned the digital signal processing so well that you can hear the attenuation and the frequencies changing and pulling themselves out of the mid-range and the tweeter drivers. And it's all done so you don't get cone distortion and breakup. And that's something that's almost really difficult to do in the aftermarket. I mean, you know, you could run an aftermarket audio system in a car, and every speaker has its own channel, or an active system as they call it, where you cross over each individual driver it's got a separate crossover frequency and a separate amplifier channel. And then you would time align it through your DSP signal processing, and you would microphone the car and all that. I don't care. You could spend 1,000 hours trying to fine-tune a car, and you still may not get it perfect. But, you know, the engineers at Mercedes-Benz, they spent the time on getting this system pretty damn good. I don't think that there is an OEM audio system in any new car today that probably will rival this. And I'm going to be testing the new LS Lexus very soon. And back in the 90s, you know, Lexus was known to have the best audio system in a car. It had Nakamichi, and it had a center-mounted subwoofer on the rear parcel shelf in the LS, the GS, and the SC models. And I got to tell you, I mean, back, you know, if you're comparing generation to generation, you know, back in the day, Lexus had the Nakamichi, and then Mercedes had the basic 100-watt Becker in the 90s, and then they eventually came out with a Bose system in the 140 chassis, which was okay. It had 4 6.5-inch free air subwoofers in the rear parcel shelf, and, you know, for a stock system, it satisfied a majority of the buyers, okay, for what it was. But it gave us, as car customizers, a really good foundation and platform to kind of rip it apart and really have a lot of fun there. But overall, I'm very impressed with the car. I'm very impressed with the handling, the power, the braking, the luxury, the comfort. The audio system is freaking amazing. Like I said, next time I get back into this car, I want to bring some of my audio tracks that I'm familiar with. And really the only thing I could say that I was a little disappointed in is from where I'm sitting, in my seating position, there is a blind spot from the B-pillar when you turn your head to the left if you're looking into the lane next to you. And that's a little concerning to me. I'm not sure why this car was designed and not taken into consideration as far as moving things fore and aft to eliminate that blind spot for the driver. And I think if you're taller than I am and the seat gets pushed further back, that might increase the blind spot effect on this car. So it's a minor thing. It's one of those things that I think you're going to get used to it driving this car every day. I'm not used to it because I don't drive cars like this on a regular basis. I drive more higher performance cars, whether it's a sedan or a straight out sports car. Now I'm going to change the mode here. So we were in comfort mode. Now I'm in sport mode. And if you look in the menu, you're changing the engine throttle response, the suspension, the steering, all the good stuff. And yeah, right away I feel that it downshifts really quickly. Whereas prior, it had that slow, lagging downshift, which is reminiscent of a 30-year-old Mercedes-Benz S-Class. You know, that's just the way those cars were in the 80s and 90s. They, you know, you had that delay when you stomped on the pedal, you had to really put your foot on that pedal, you know, because it wasn't throttled by wire back then, back in the days. And you could drive this car with, two fingers. I'm not holding it like this, and I'm not struggling, because it's not that type of a car. This is a car you sit back, you enjoy the audio, you enjoy the comfort. I mean, here's a C43 right next to me. I mean, that's a bumpy little car compared to this. And it's funny because the design language that Mercedes-Benz went with this car is trickling down to all the other models. So like the C-Class is really like a baby S-Class. But as far as the two cars, there's a huge difference between the two cars, because the C-Class is not as well built as this, does not ride as well as this, and it does not have the luxury accompaniments that this car has. And another thing I want to mention too is in this segment of car, okay, we have the Audi A8, we have the BMW 7 Series, we have the Lexus LS. Then you have the Cadillac CT6, all right, which I don't even think it doesn't really come close to where this car is. And, you get into any of those cars, and I've driven them all. And the BMW does feel a little bit more dynamic. I'm not, I'm being realistic. It's a BMW. Everybody knows that. And it's got all the technology, and it's got all the bells and whistles and all of that. Same stuff that this car has. But when you get in that car, do you feel special as far as a status? Okay? Because that's really what the Mercedes-Benz brand and lineage is all about. It's all about status. It's all about, the pioneering world-class luxury in a car. Every brand has their own motto. BMW, the ultimate driving machine. Lexus, the pursuit of perfection. So this car really is the benchmark. This is the car that all the manufacturers try to best, but still to this day they can't. And I feel the same way. Like when you get into an Audi A8, even an S8, or you get into the Cadillac CT6, yes, they're very, very nice cars, but you don't get that level of sophistication, class, and you don't have the mystique that Mercedes-Benz has spent so much time and so many years perfecting to make this car the benchmark in its class. So you're not going to get that from Audi. You're not going to get that from BMW, because like I said, every brand, they have individually different core values, okay? And that's just the way automotive industry is. I mean, you know, you're never going to see Ford or Lincoln try to come out with a car that's going to even attempt to top this. That's not their core value. That's not their audience. That's not their market share. And that's something that, you know, as an automotive guy that's been around this for so long, between working on cars and modifying cars and everything, you know, you have to understand that. And you have to understand what you're going to get out of this car is a hell of a lot different than what you're going to get out of the other brands in the same segment. And that's just the reality of it. If you think you're going to get into an Audi, a Cadillac, or a Lexus, and people are going to think that you're some billionaire, it's not happening. I'm sorry. It's definitely not happening. You know, if you get into one of these cars, a Maybach, a Rolls, a Bentley, you know, we're in a very judgmental society. And, you know, there's so much marketing between social media, between print, between radio, television. And, you know, Mercedes-Benz does so well, you know, with the marketing. I mean, you know, the New York market is one of the best markets for these cars. And as soon as you drive down the West Side Highway going into Manhattan, you know, what do you see? You see the new 2018 S-Class on a billboard on the left side of the highway. And then on the way back, when you go north, you see it on the right. So you're getting the point is that they do so much marketing, and it's so much persuasion and penetration into our society to say, hey, this is the best luxury car in the world, okay? This is the best. Now, they're not saying, hey, we're better than Rolls-Royce, we're better than Bentley. Those are two completely different experiences between the ownership and the purchasing. Those cars are 2 to 3 times the price of this car. And that's a completely different audience. You're not going to see, you know, 100 Bentley Mulsannes driving around on the FDR Drive in New York City every day. You might see 50 or 60 of these, you know, at any given time, you know, whether they're chauffeur driven or not. So, you know, this car's not trying to be something that it's not. But what it's trying to be is the best and the benchmark in the ultra luxury sedan segment. And it wins. It wins every year in a row. Every journalist, every person that has tested this car and goes into the test knowing and understanding what they're going to get out of it, gets it. You know, and I'm the same way. I mean, I have a performance background. All I really care about on cars, you know, for my personal needs and things that excite me is the performance aspect. I like to go fast. I like certain dynamic characteristics in any car that I get into that excites me and makes me feel excited and special. Now, going into this car, I don't have that expectation, nor do I want it. Okay? All I want is to be comfortable. I want to be quiet. I want to have an incredible audio system so I can sit back and relax. I want to have all the technology. I want to smell the leather. I want to look at the detail on the car. And all of those little things, they really contribute to the entire visual and sensory experience driving this car. Okay? And like I said, I got to tell you, man, I'm really impressed with this car. And, you know, you look at the detail. I mean, all of this fine stitching. You know, we didn't have that on these cars back in the 80s and early 90s. You know, some of the S-Class models, the S600s, the 140 chassis, they used to give you a little bit of material stitched on the dash and on the doors. And but it was not like it's done today. I mean, they're doing everything. Everything is covered from the console to, you know, the door rest, everything. And, you know, to do that in the aftermarket, you'll spend $30,000 to $50,000 ripping this car apart and reskinning it. So you got to think about that, like what you're getting. I mean, just the interior alone, between the audio system and the entire leather-wrapped interior, if you were to do that in the aftermarket on a car of this size and of this caliber to this level, you would probably spend $80,000 just on that alone. And that's not including the rest of the car. So, I mean, just think about that. So, you know, for the value of what this car is, you know, under 150, 160 grand to get all of this with a warranty, with the best service that you're going to get as far as when you bring the car in, they don't know what to do for you at Mercedes-Benz. And, you know, you're still part of that elite league of wealthy business owners, entrepreneurs, etc., that own and buy this car. Okay, you're not going to see kids buying this car. You know, they're going to go in and buy an E63S if they're, you know, a successful younger guy, or like a C63S, stuff like that, because that's just more exciting to them. And that's what I would do as well. I don't think I would go out and buy an S-Class now or anytime soon. It's just not a car that appeals to me. But I do love driving them. And I do like every opportunity I get to get behind the wheel of one and take it for the day. Because I don't get a chance to drive a lot of these cars, and I don't get a chance to drive a luxury car at this level. And I will tell you now, as we're coming to an end of this drive, I am truly enjoying this experience. The seats are incredible. I have no back pain. The climate control system is spot on. And, you know, just everything about it. I love it. Would I be able to drive this car every day? Possibly. But I'm always on the go. I'm always in a rush. I tend to drive a little bit more aggressively, so this probably wouldn't work for me. And then if you step it down to an E-Class, they have a shorter wheelbase, bumpier ride. Now you're not really in that same category of what this is. You know, this is like floating on air. And I got to tell you, it feels pretty good to float on air coming from my GT350 that I am driving daily. I mean, I'm on some really bad roads right now. And another thing I want to talk about is when you hit bad roads with this car, the torsional rigidity of the car is outstanding. And the way I know that is on other cars and other S-Classes of prior generations that had the aromatic suspension, when you would hit really bad roads where the suspension is going crazy back and forth, you would feel the front end. There was a lot of weakness, and there was a lot of, you know, the wheels and tires were just doing a lot of weird things. And, you know, times have changed. I mean, they're building these cars stronger, lighter, and better. And you could hit some really bad stuff, and it's not going to upset the car. I mean, this thing is just so awesome. My God. Yeah, the car's incredible. It really is, guys. So, guys, I really appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. I appreciate all the support on my channel. There's going to be a lot more car reviews coming as soon as winter gives us a break and things start warming up. It's just really too hard to do them right now. With the weather, it's just not cooperating, and it's very, very cold to do it. And the dealers don't want to let me take the cars out and drive them hard, and I don't blame them. I mean, you know, it's been really cold, and I don't want to drive any kind of car, you know, with cold tires, especially pushing it. But like I said, if you guys got any questions or comments, or post them below. If you own this car, 2018 S560 Fanatic, and I'd love to hear your feedback. What do you think of it? Why did you buy this car? You know, what persuaded you to buy this over everything else? I know why people buy this car, a majority of the people, but I want to hear from you guys. I want to hear from people that own this car, or people that have worked in these cars, whether you detail them or you mechanically fix them at the dealer or whatever. You know, this is a very special car, and it's one of those cars that Mercedes-Benz, at this day and age, where the domestic automotive market is really doing well. I mean, they're doing a really good job. Cadillac, you know, they're doing an incredible job with their brand. Mercedes-Benz cannot jeopardize this car falling even one notch from being the benchmark. It just can't do it right now. You know, this is pretty much the identity of the star on the front of this car, is this car. You know, and you have to really take that consideration. I mean, this is their brand DNA. You know, they always built stately, luxury cars. That was their thing. Now, growing up, you know, in the 80s and 90s, you know, we would see S-Class Mercedes-Benzes in every of one of my favorite movies. You know, whether it was Lethal Weapon, Die Hard, you know, Coming to America. Everybody that was either a villain, the bad guy, or the most successful guy in the movie was in a black S-Class Mercedes-Benz, okay? They didn't use any other car. They weren't in Cadillacs. They weren't in any other car. So today, I'm really disappointed in Hollywood because all you see now are the bad guys and the businessmen driving in black Chevy Tahoes or black Cadillac Escalades. And I really hope that Hollywood starts to wake up and bring this car back onto the silver screen because, you know, it's one of those things that growing up in the 80s and 90s and working on these cars, and you know, when these cars came out, this was a huge influence on me getting involved in custom car building, was working on these cars, you know, back then. And, you know, growing up, we used to watch those movies and always say, hey, you know, always the bad guy or, you know, the drug dealer. Always somebody had a black S-Class Mercedes-Benz. And I really hope in the future of movie production and even, you know, television production, we start seeing more of that. Let them bring the black S-Class back with the tinted windows and just make badass car chase scenes and do all of that. I mean, forget about using all the other cars. But the way Hollywood works today, it's whatever brand wants to do the marketing and get the kickbacks. That's the reality of what it is. You know, things were done differently 30 years ago. But the way things are now, we see Dodge and we see Cadillac and we see Audi in almost all of television that we watch today in television production. So, you know, like I said, it's the mystique of the brand. It's the mystique of this mark and this car, the S-Class Mercedes-Benz. And, yeah, so this car's a home run. They hit it out of the park. I don't think there's any other car on the market right now that's going to best this car. And like I said, especially at this price level, you know, anything above this level, you have the Maybach, you have the Bentley, you have the Rolls-Royce. But now, you're not saying that those cars are better cars as far as an engineering perspective. That's more personalized, hand-built, luxurious, more of a limited production, bespoke brand. So there's a big difference. But stay tuned, guys. There's much more to come on this channel. Hope you guys really enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it. And look forward to catching up with you guys very soon. Any questions, comments, you want to reach out to me direct, autofanatic@yahoo.com. See you guys later.